you ever wondered why we refer to the day Christ died as Good Friday? Seems somewhat strange, doesn't it? I mean, Friday is the day that he who was celebrated had become despised. He who was innocent was punished like the guilty. He who was the lion was slaughtered like a lamb. That doesn't seem good. And consider the Pharisees and their motives. For them, it was a premeditated murder, though it was actually a predestined sacrifice. They thought they were taking his life, though he was in fact surrendering it. Death was their goal, yet life was the outcome. Because God had other plans, he made one day affect all of eternity. He turned the wounds of one into healing for many. He transformed our worst acts of hate into the greatest expression of love. So that at the cross, we can hand over our sins in exchange for righteousness. We can lay down our burdens and pick up freedom. We can come broken, yet leave restored. The enemy thought it was going to be a bad day. We now call it good. And though we all thought it was the end, it was actually just the beginning. It seems God has a way of rescuing us from ourselves and flipping things around. Maybe that's why we call it Good Friday.
Greetings from New Life Bible Church, which is one of the family of churches in the Weald area of Northwest London. I am Pastor Rick Johnston with the first reading on this Good Friday morning. It's taken from Mark 15 and the first 15 verses. Very early in the morning, the chief priests with the elders and the teachers of the law and the whole Sanhedrin reached a decision. They bound Jesus, led him away, and turned him over to Pilate. "Are you king of the Jews?" asked Pilate. "Yes, it is as you say," Jesus replied. The chief priests accused him of many things. So again, Pilate asked him, "Aren't you going to answer? See how many things they are accusing you of?" But Jesus still made no reply, and Pilate was amazed. Now it was the custom at the feast to release a prisoner whom the people requested. A man called Barabbas was in prison with the insurrectionists who had committed murder in the uprising. So the crowd came up and asked Pilate to do for them what he usually did. "Do you want me to release to you the king of the Jews?" asked Pilate. Knowing it was out of envy that the chief priests had handed Jesus over to him. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have Pilate release Barabbas instead. "What shall I do then with the one you call the king of the Jews?" Pilate asked them. "Crucify him," they shouted. "Why? What crime has he committed?" asked Pilate. But they shouted all the louder, "Crucify him." Wanting to satisfy the crowd, Pilate released Barabbas to them. He had Jesus flogged and handed him over to be crucified. In this part of this great story, we see the trial that Jesus was subjected to. And I just want us to reflect on a few things that Jesus endured on his road to the cross as we go forward with our readings today. First of all, he was bound. Second, he was arrested for doing good. Thirdly, he was falsely accused of many things. Fifthly, he was taunted and mocked. Sixthly, he was flogged and beaten with stripes. 7, he was sentenced to death. He carried all this and more on that day, and he carried it for us. Say to yourself today, he did it for me.
Good morning. Happy Easter to everyone. I am Effie, the local pastor for RCCG House of Joy in Harrow and Wealdstone. Today I'll be reading an account of Jesus Christ before he was crucified from the book of Matthew, Matthew 27 to 31. That is Matthew 27 to 31. And I read. Then Pilate's soldiers took Jesus into the governor's palace, and the whole company gathered around him. They stripped off his clothes and put a scarlet robe on him. Then they made a crown out of thorny branches and placed it on his head and put a stick in his right hand. Then they knelt before him and mocked him. Long live the King of the Jews, they said. They spat on him and took the stick and hit him over the head. When they had finished mocking him, they took the robe off and put his own clothes back on him. Then they led him out to be crucified. That ends the Bible reading. Today, as we celebrate the resurrection of Jesus Christ, Easter is a time to reflect on the great price that Jesus paid for us, that we may have everlasting life. So as we reflect on the price that Jesus paid, I pray that we will be able to acknowledge and appreciate what a loving, wonderful God we serve. Happy Easter to you all. Bye.
Hello, my name's Reverend Jodie Stoll and I'm the vicar at St Michael and All Angels in Harrow Weald, and we bring our very warmest greetings to you this Good Friday. Our reading is from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 15, beginning at verse 21. They compelled a passerby who was coming in from the country to carry his cross. It was Simon of Cyrene, the father of Alexander and Rufus. Then they brought Jesus to the place called Golgotha, which means the place of a skull. And they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it. And they crucified him and divided his clothes among them, casting lots to decide what each should take. It was 9 o'clock in the morning when they crucified him. The inscription of the charge against him read, "The King of the Jews." And with him they crucified 2 bandits, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by derided him, shaking their heads and saying, "Aha, you who would destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself and come down from the cross." In the same way, the chief priests, along with the scribes, were also mocking him among themselves and saying, "He saved others, he cannot save himself. Let the Messiah, the King of Israel, come down from the cross now, so that we may see and believe." Those who were crucified with him also taunted him.
Good morning on this Good Friday. I bring greetings from Wealdstone Baptist Church. My name is Martin Whaley, I'm the senior minister there. Our next reading is going to be from Mark chapter 15, starting at verse 33. At the 6th hour, darkness came over the whole land until the 9th hour. And at the 9th hour, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, "Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some of those standing near heard this, they said, "Listen, he's calling Elijah." One man ran, filled a sponge with wine vinegar, put it on a stick, and offered it to Jesus to drink. "Now leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah comes down to take him," he said. With a loud cry, Jesus breathed his last. The curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. And when the centurion, who stood there in front of Jesus, heard his cry and saw how he died, he said, "Surely this man was the Son of God." May you know life this Easter through Jesus' death.
From Wealdstone Methodist Church. The reading is from Luke chapter 23, reading from verse 50 to 56. Now there was a man named Joseph, a member of the council, a good and upright man, who had not consented to their decision and action. He came from the Judean town of Arimathea, and he was waiting for the kingdom of God. Going to Pilate, he asked for Jesus' body. Then he took it down, wrapped it in linen cloth, and placed it in a tomb cut in the rock, one in which no one had yet been laid. It was preparation day, and the Sabbath was about to begin. The women who had come with Jesus from Galilee followed Joseph and saw the tomb and how his body was laid in it. Then they went home and prepared spices and perfumes. But they rested on the Sabbath in obedience to the commandment.
Hello, on behalf of Wealdstone Methodist Church, I'm speaking to you this Good Friday from underneath the duvet. As we think about the burial of Jesus, that seems to be an appropriate place to be. And wherever you find yourself, however cut off you're feeling at the moment, however isolated from your loved ones, from people in our communities who don't have internet connections, however helpless you're feeling in the face of the momentous events around us, let's think about Joseph of Arimathea and the bunch of women who accompanied Jesus from Galilee. They did what they could. We can't make everything better, but let's choose to do what we can. And my prayer is that God will lead us to find what that is, and that in the meantime, we will know the sheltering love of God as we wait.
In our readings, we've heard of the great sacrifice that Jesus made for us on the cross. All around us, we see living examples of such sacrifice. It's hard to imagine a time outside of war in which so many of us have depended on so few. On behalf of Holy Trinity Wealdstone, and indeed all the people of churches together in the Weald, I'd like to thank every one of those in the National Health Service who are risking their lives as a sacrifice for the many. We appreciate you and we celebrate you. Thank you also to all the key workers who are keeping everything going while facing increased risk themselves. Their sacrifice is an example to us of the way Jesus laid down his life on our behalf. He paid the ultimate price, but death could not hold him. He won for us freedom from sin and a life that is eternal. And he promises to all who follow him that our death will not be the end, but that we will rise to new life in him. However bleak it looks this Good Friday, let us remember that Easter Sunday is coming. A reading from John chapter 20. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance. So she came running to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved, and said, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they've put him." So Peter and the other disciple started for the tomb. Both were running, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent over and looked in at the strips of linen lying there, but did not go in. Then Simon Peter came along behind him and went straight into the tomb. He saw the strips of linen lying there, as well as the cloth that had been wrapped around Jesus' head. The cloth was still lying in its place, separate from the linen. Finally, the other disciple who had reached the tomb first also went inside. He saw and believed. It is my prayer for each one of you this Easter that you will see a glimpse of who Jesus is, and you too will believe.
It's Friday. Jesus is praying. Peter's asleep. Judas is betraying. But Sunday's coming. It's Friday. Pilate's struggling. The council is conspiring. The crowd is vilifying. They don't even know that Sunday's coming. It's Friday. The disciples are running like sheep without a shepherd. Mary's crying. Peter is denying. But they don't know that Sundays are coming. It's Friday. The Romans beat my Jesus. They robe him in scarlet. They crown him with thorns. But they don't know that Sunday's coming. It's Friday. See Jesus walking to Calvary. His blood dripping. His body stumbling. And his spirit's burdened. But you see, it's only Friday. Sunday's coming. It's Friday. The world's winning. People are sinning. And evil's grinning. It's Friday. The soldiers nailed my Savior's hands to the cross. They nailed my Savior's feet to the cross. And then they raised him up next to criminals. It's Friday. But let me tell you something. Sunday's coming. It's Friday. The disciples are questioning what has happened to their king. And the Pharisees are celebrating that their scheming has been achieved. But they don't know it's only Friday. Sunday's coming. It's Friday. He's hanging on the cross, feeling forsaken by his Father, left alone and dying. Can nobody save him? Oh, it's Friday, but Sunday's coming. It's Friday. The earth trembles. The sky grows dark. My King yields his spirit. It's Friday. Hope is lost. Death has won. Sin has conquered. And Satan's just a laughing. It's Friday. Jesus is buried. A soldier stands guard, and a rock is rolled into place. But it's Friday. It is only Friday. Sunday is a coming.